Good evening and welcome to Discover Alaska Lecture Series. This is brought to you by UAF Summer Sessions and Lifelong Learning. My name is Althea St. Martin and I'll be your host for this evening. Again this year, Summer Sessions has a full lineup of free programs Monday through Thursday evenings at 7 o'clock. Each Wednesday night over the course of the summer, Discover Alaska features a local community member speaking on Alaskan topics. We appreciate the time they are donating to help us all learn more about our great state. Next week for Discover Alaska, we'll be hearing from Newt Keeland, who is going to be sharing the hidden life of lynx and snowshoe hare. This is the 16th season for Discover Alaska, and the in-person programs are held here at the BP Design Theater in the new engineering building on the UAF campus. It is also being live streamed and recorded. This allows us to take advantage of technology to present to a much wider audience. And later, you can view and also share this lecture and all of the Summer Sessions lectures by going to the Summer Sessions website. And that's at uaf.edu/summer/events. They have many years of these lectures there also, so some fascinating topics. Tonight, in addition to questions from our in-person audience, and I'll bring around the microphone for you to ask your question so that it does get into the recording. So they don't, online don't just hear the answer, they actually hear the question that you're asking too. And then our online viewers will also be able to type questions for the presenter into the link at the bottom of their screen. But before I introduce tonight's speaker, a few housekeeping items. Please turn off your cell phones. And UAF's mask policy is you do not need a mask if you are fully vaccinated. I'm very interested to hear tonight's speaker, Wes Potter. He's a retired military officer and most recently, a past deputy garrison commander at Fort Wainwright. After retiring, Wes and his wife decided to make Fairbanks their home. His time is spent supporting community organizations and presenting various historical problems through the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. His presentation tonight is on the history of the Davidson Ditch, its construction, current conditions, and how the Davidson Ditch fits into the history of Fairbanks. His topic tonight is walking the Davidson Ditch. And Friday, he'll be leading a group walking the Davidson Ditch. And I'm sorry to report his class is full. Oh, please help me welcome Wes Potter.
All right. First of all, just and Althea, thanks for mentioning the tour on Friday. That is set up through Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. And some of you may know the ditch is pretty darn long, over 80 miles long. We are not walking the ditch on Friday. So kind of a convoy of cars, people partnering in. We're going to go up and hit a few spots and then come on back. So that's our tour on Friday. And I'll be traveling this fall, but I hope to do the same thing again next summer, a couple iterations, because it is a lot of fun. With this, by the way, with the picture you had of me up there, that was like to my wife, oh my God, they need a picture. So that was my wife taking a picture. And that face that I have is me worrying about my wife handling the camera correctly versus a smile. So anyhow, first of all, the title here, Walking the Davidson Ditch. When I first floated that up, I got calls and notes. Did you walk it? Did you walk that? I said, no, I have not walked the whole Davidson Ditch. As I mentioned, it's a pretty long ditch, but a lot of the ditch is on private property and leased property and things like that. So I just stay. But I have, make sure I hit the wrong button here, but I have been on a lot of it. And some of you maybe have walked a portion of the ditch, and you quickly realize that once you walk 50 yards of the ditch, the rest of the 80 miles pretty much looks the same. It's a ditch, okay? Now with a lot of trees and everything else in there. Okay, a little bit of an outline of what I'm going to talk about. And first of all, any of you that have been in presentations with me before, I'll just let you know I'm a graphic kind of guy. That's just the way my mind works. I got to have a timeline, and I use a lot of pictures. So I'll start off a little bit here with a timeline. I'll talk about why the ditch, talk about Mr. Davidson a little bit. The stars align. You'll see what that means when I get to it, and then some specifics on the ditch itself. Talk about the construction, routing, and all that other stuff. All righty? And please, if anybody has a question while I'm on a particular slide or a graphic, it just burned, go ahead and ask it now. That way you don't have to try and remember it at the very end. All righty? So a little bit of timeline here. I don't think any of this is a surprise to you. I'm not going to hit on each one of these very long. You can see we're starting to get our gold strikes and gold rushes here in Alaska. The steamer Portland arrives in Seattle in 1897. That's when the no kidding word got to the rest of the world, there's gold up here. That was the whole point of the steamer Portland. Getting off the boat with bags and bags of gold, these guys were. Mr. Davidson heads to Juneau right at the time of the Yukon Gold Rush. Gets up there, does some work there. Of course, within a couple years, 18 months or so, is the Nome gold strike and the rush there. He's not happy, generally speaking, with how things are working out for him on the Yukon, so he heads on over to Nome. While in Nome, he does some work, and we'll see a little bit more of that here in a little bit. He does some work there. He hears of the gold strike here in the Fairbanks area, Fairbanks district. Like I said, he does some work in Nome with the ditch, with mapping and with water rights, and he brings that expertise here to Fairbanks. We'll talk some more about some transportation issues that impacted on the Davidson Ditch, but as you can see, we got some railroads being worked, arriving into Fairbanks in 1923. Fairbanks Exploration Company set up in 1924. The middle ditch, I'll talk about that, show you a picture of that in a little bit. You can see the construction timeline by percentage for the Davidson Ditch. 60% in September 26, 80% December 27, and then completed in July of 1928. Mr. Davidson passes away before the ditch is completed. Alrighty. And then, of course, out Chena Pump there, we have the Chena River Ester Ditch construction there in 1934. Now this is a upper left, if you can read it, says 1848. It's a graphic of gold discoveries and strikes in Alaska. And it's running from 1840, whatever it was, through about 1914. It builds a little slow, but the interesting thing is the discoveries, for the most part, are on reasonably easily accessible locations here. And pretty soon here, you'll see stuff to start to pop here in the interior. And I'll read off the years. We're at 1888 right now. 1896. 98, the interior in Nome. 1902. 1906. And finishing it out here real quick. So with this graphic, as you can see, I mean, gold was important business to Alaska, and for the last half of that video, important to the interior of Alaska and Fairbanks here too. So why the ditch? First of all, water's water, and what we needed at all locations was water under pressure. And so we run a ditch out, and in this graphic here, I've got a dredge there floating in water, doing its thing, and a water cannon, or more commonly called a monitor, blasting away at the side of the hill. At the time that Davidson Ditch was coming along, I call it the easy gold was had in this area. The hard gold, the more difficult gold, was still available down deep. But to get to that area down deep, you have to get rid of that overburden, muck, sand, silt, whatever you want to call it, and using the water cannons or the monitors was the most efficient way of doing that. And the only way they're going to work is if you have water pressure behind them. So that was a primary reason for getting water, building the ditch, and getting that water high up on the side of the hill. So when it comes down, you've got water pressure. Another reason for it, this is out of Nome, but also around the interior of Alaska, we had thawing fields, basically pipes that go down in there, and even just cold water flowing through these pipes would thaw that permafrost a little bit earlier than normal, so that dredges and water cannons and tractors can get in there and move that dirt out of the way to get to that gold. And here's one out at Esther. You can see, obviously, the water cannon blasting away. The pipe that the fella, I think, is kind of standing on is more of a temporary pipe, probably coming off of the Chena pump house in the Esther Ditch. And basically, he just stands there. The monitor itself is balanced with a box of rocks right there. And the fellow operating just swings it back and forth, blasting that silt away. All right, I mentioned we'd talk about Mr. Jameson a little bit. Here's some key points for his life. Very well-educated man. His family primarily was a farming family in California. It was just a personal interest of his to get into engineering, and then, of course, with the discovery of gold, to come up and see what he could do here in Alaska. See the middle point there? He heads over to Nome, sets up a surveying business, does freshwater rights, and then he co-produces the map of the Nome Peninsula at the time. As a matter of fact, you can go on to the Library of Congress website and get that map and see his name there, mentioned as a co-producer of that thing. Construction of the Miocene Ditch, that's the longest ditch servicing the whole Nome mining district, or the Seward Peninsula mining district. We'll take a look at that in a minute. And then in 1921 was his first outline for the ditch here in Fairbanks. Now, he was not the only surveyor to survey a ditch line, what we call the Davidson Ditch. There's probably half a dozen other surveyors that also checked his work. They checked their other work, because you can't mess these things up, you know. So, okay, Miocene Ditch. This is the beachfront off of Nome. Probably a lot of you have seen these pictures like this before, but it was a water-intensive operation, and there was only so much water getting to that area. So we're going into Nome. As you can see, it's partly cloudy in Nome, according to Google Earth at least. And pop, there are the ditches. So the blue, this particular blue right here, the longest one, that is the Miocene Ditch. And there are a lot of other ditches, obviously, to take care of Nome. And the reason for the ditches there were for the same reasons we needed them here in the interior. It was to get water pressure, to operate water cannons, and that type of thing, in the thawing fields. Now, one thing that Nome had at the time that Fairbanks didn't have was ready access, transportation access. I mean, Nome's on the coast. Trying to get stuff into the interior of Alaska was very expensive. So for the Miocene Ditch, a lot of the same things we see at Davidson Ditch were at the Miocene Ditch. The ditch itself, some of the inverted pipes. I don't know if they did a tunnel there or not, but a lot of the same technology was used there. But this is almost 25 years before Davidson Ditch.
Is the name Miocene like Davidson, named after somebody that worked on the ditch, or paid for it, or whatever?
I believe Miocene, just a time frame, period of our geologic history, the Miocene, Pleistocene, that type of thing. And when I was doing this, and I did a 5-week presentation on the Davidson Ditch, we dug a little bit deeper, no pun intended, into the ditches around Nome, and I started to look at all the names. I'm going, man, I got like 50 different ditch names, but I only have 10 ditches. So what's going on? Well, I found out that whatever company happened to own the ditch at the time could change the name. So Miocene, there was a Pleistocene ditch, which I think is the yellow one. It later changed its name with a new company. So whoever was in charge got to name their ditch. Yeah. All right. This is the head of the Miocene Ditch, and just kind of at least mentally remember what this looks like. Pretty simple stuff. You've got a dam across the middle. You can see that. It looks like it's a gravel, rock, boulder dam. To the left is a control gate that controls the water going into the Miocene ditch. You can see the fellow there gives you a scale of size. And then right in the middle is another control gate to allow water to flow down its natural course if it got too high behind the dam. The Davidson Ditch has a similar type of setup, but a little bit different dam construction. We'll get into that in just a second. But that's where it's all that's where it all starts. And again, I mentioned the need for water pressure for the water monitors. Again, it's not a high-tech operation here. You can see the fella here handling this particular cannon on the backside, right about there. Big, huge box of rocks to balance the thing out, and all he's doing is swinging it back and forth. Now, I do like this picture. Take a look at the lower left there. I'm going to zoom in on it for you. So, a couple guys, a couple gals out for a Sunday afternoon. The ladies really look like they're having fun. Let's go find some gold. But there's a pickaxe up there, a pan down by the one gal. Yeah, I don't know how much fun the one gal is really having out there. But that was a pretty good picture. Let's go out for a date. Okay, stars align. There's some things that just seem to come together every now and then. And as you'll see in a little bit, this was a big investment. That all these things had to line up just right for the Davidson Ditch and the Fairbanks Exploration Company to work. First of all, design. As I mentioned, the Nome operation was about 25 years prior. In California, almost 50 years prior, they're using the same technology for mining down there. So the bits and pieces and parts, the dam construction, ditch construction, siphons, bridging, management, and product delivery at the far end, it's all known. There is no new technology brought in for the Davidson Ditch. Good. Financial resources. As I mentioned earlier, the easy gold was gone. So the individual panner, the partners, 2 or 3, 4 people, they've kind of played out. That easy stuff is gone. The only way you're going to get after that gold down deep is with larger corporate investment. And that's what we have here with Smelting, Refining and Mining Company and the Fairbanks Exploration Company, also called FEC. Human resources, again, just like the technology, the smart people that knew how to do this were around. We talked about Mr. Davidson. You needed hydrologists, you needed the engineers, you needed the geologists to work the ground and all that stuff. But it was all available, and again, nothing new. And then I mentioned here people available in Fairbanks. It was at that time, the late teens, early 20s, when the easy gold was going down. So you had a lot of folks that were in that industry just kind of hanging out. And when they were going after the placer mining the easy gold, it was for the most part a summertime operation. So now here comes a company that's saying, hey, we can employ you for a few years, year round. And they had more than enough people here locally to do that. Equipment resources, most of what they used was locally available. Some of the stuff was brought in. I think most of you have been to Pioneer Park, seen the steam backhoe there. I think it still has a little placard there. It was used in Panama, then used in Hawaii, and then brought up here and used on the Davidson Ditch. But a lot of steam-operated equipment was brought in. And in coal, I mentioned equipment. It's not really equipment, but the Fairbanks Exploration Company, in addition to the ditch, another thing, they're setting up a huge electric power plant, and they're going to use coal. And in this particular chart, you can see that at the time of Davidson Ditch construction, let's say 1925 or so, the amount of coal, the red line, that's being mined here in Alaska is taken off. And it's a lot cheaper than bringing in coal from the 1925, 48 states? I don't know. Than the lower 48 and importing it from Canada. So that's another thing that helps to save cost and make that bottom line a little more palatable to the investors, was coal. Transportation, couple things there, shipping from the Pacific Northwest and from California. A lot of the stuff came out of Puget Sound and California. Shipping was pretty easy. As I mentioned, 25 years earlier, getting it to Nome, they're right on the ocean there, so they can get it there easy. But trying to get that same stuff to the interior of Alaska was difficult. The main port at the time was Seward. And then, as I showed you on the timeline, the Alaska Railroad from Seward up to Fairbanks was completed in 23 or something like that. And you'll see that right here. Okay, West Coast, to include out of the Puget Sound. And then we've got our railway going from Seward all the way up to Fairbanks. And then the what was later called the Tanana Valley Railroad system from Fairbanks all the way out to Chatanika up here in the upper right. So we got, whoops, I didn't turn anything off. Okay, so we got heavy equipment. As most of you know, we got pipes. The pipe and the heavy metal and stuff like that in 30-foot sections was all brought up by rail. By rail all the way to Chatanika, no issues. The cost of getting that steel pipe from the Puget Sound to Chatanika was the same cost as moving it from Chatanika 20 or 30 miles up the valley. Okay? It was very expensive to move that stuff. And I did mention the construction program itself was year-round. I'm assuming most of you have driven up the Steese Highway up along the Chatanika. As you round Chatanika Lodge and start going up the valley there, it's pretty wide and broad and swampy. Wintertime was the best time to move stuff up that valley. The ground was frozen hard. It's much easier to move it through the swamps. Okay. When I first started looking at the Davidson Ditch, I always thought it was kind of a standalone program all by itself. But as you can see, it was just one part of the overall investment package by the Fairbanks Exploration Company. And by the way, these costs are $1925. So that's pretty significant in $1925. Was it about the third or fourth most expensive thing on the list? There we go, $20. So if everything was perfect, it'd be $151 million in 2020 to do what they did in 1925. And this is from, you can see my source, but it's actually written, I think, in 1939. I'll let you read that. So the Fairbanks Exploration Company is doing a lot up until 39 or 40, and we all know what happens. It just comes to a screeching halt, but at least you can see what they had up to that point. All right, dredges. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. There's our Chatanika dredge in the middle. You guys are all experts on dredges. Is
that the current picture?
That picture of Chatanika was this last spring, yeah, so a few months ago. Yep. And I zoomed out on this particular picture because there's a lot of interesting writing that's on the dredge right now. And I was up there a couple weeks ago, and off this, off the boom, off the back end, somebody had gotten out there. There's a little gangplank you can walk out onto the dredge if you want, but they'd set up two ropes and a swing, and you can get on the swing and swing back and forth. Yeah, tourism, right? All right, number of dredges. This is kind of a big picture story here. You can see the number of dredges through Alaska at the time. Again, we're kicking off Fairbanks Exploration Company here about 1925 or so, and then the dredges here locally, I think it was 8, what they mentioned, are involved in here. Construction timeline, again, pretty self-explanatory. And you see this, and it's easy to plot this information on a chart or a timeline, but I can only imagine people in the offices having to coordinate with California on ordering dredges, getting them shipped up here. And they were shipped unassembled up here. They were assembled on site. So it's kind of like a Lego set when you got it. And I know for the first couple dredges, the holes didn't match up when they put them together. So all the backroom stuff that's going on to make this happen just amazes me. And it's a business. You're going to have people problems. I'll let you read this one. Yeah, it would have been interesting to see Chatanika back then. You kind of drive by it now, and that's about it. But yeah, things are happening in Chatanika. All right, mention the middle ditch. This ditch was constructed at the time that Davidson Ditch was being constructed. Its goal was to get water out of the Chatanika and down to Chatanika down here. And it's still there. You can see the Steese Highway, the nice, nice smooth line right here, Chatanika River on the other side, and you can see a little bit of the Davidson Ditch up here, and I'll highlight that in a minute. It was technology-wise, work-wise, development-wise, it was not as complicated as the Davidson Ditch. It was all on the ground. It was all just a ditch. And that's what it looks like this last spring, I think. I took this picture. So we are looking west. There's the highway right here, and there's the ditch as it looks right now. Davidson Ditch, we're going to talk about some bits, pieces, and parts, and this is part of the walking the Davidson Ditch, and I like to start at the beginning, the dam. And I'm going to go quickly down through each one of these things, giving you an idea what was involved with the construction, and in some cases what it looks like today. So we'll start with the dam. This is a picture. There's the Steese on the upper right, and this is about the, just a second, 68.5 mile marker. There is that's a rock quarry right underneath the word beginning. And it should be a pretty good indication of why this particular site was selected for the dam. And you can walk down into the rock quarry. Rocks, boulders, and everything else is chunked out of the sides of the hill here. If you're going to put in a dam, you need a place like that versus trying to run a dam into silt and things like that. Plus, for the Chatanika River, it's kind of a choke point also. Instead of that wide open flat river basin, you've got a small area that you can concentrate on and put your dam in. If you can't see it, the dam is right here. And this is as of 2 days ago. I'm going to point something else out. Hopefully you can see it. And I'm going to point it out because the pointer here isn't that good. But here's the dam. There's some diversion gates right here. You'll see those in a minute. But you can kind of see a dark area going off and up there. That's the actual Davidson Ditch. You got the dam right there. It diverts water, and it goes on up that way. I got a little better picture here, I think, a little bit. So that's what it looks like as of 2 years ago. The river is flowing this way, that way. And you can see what's left of the dam. You got the control gates right here, and the ditch goes off that way. These control gates, these four control gates control the water that went into the ditch. So let's build ourselves a dam. Bunch of sticks, logs. Then we're going to fill it with gravel. We'll put 2 layers of boards over the top of the thing, and then cover it with a whole bunch of sheets of iron to protect it. So again, water flow is this direction. We call it a dam, but really, I mean, engineers can correct me, it's technically a weir. You remember that picture I showed you of the Miocene Dam? It was no kidding a dam. It was stopping the water, diverting it into the Miocene ditch. This particular one is a weir, it just lets the water get to a certain level and then it flows over the top. And at the far end, they use the control gates to gauge how much water is going into the ditch. So it's a weir. But it is giving you an additional 7 feet of depth behind the weir. That's not on the test question, but all right, there's what it looks like from up. You can see what's left of the dam going across. Control gates here and here. If we could plop the dam into that location right now, there are no kidding pictures I found of the dam at the time of construction. So I have to go by words and what people have seen and things like that. But it's believed that the dam was about 50 to 60 feet across this way, and then they just had rubble and rocks and stuff piled in over here. And of course, I added some blue for the water. As you can imagine, you add another 7 feet of depth up above the dam. We're going to have a trout and grayling pond, so it's going to fill that in pretty good. Water is flowing over the top, and we're going to use our control gates to divert water into the ditch. And off it goes. And just to let you know, this the dam site is in a Alaska DOT rock quarry area, and it's butted up against a private company's quarry also. So if you want to go visit, just make a few phone calls. Nice folks, no big deal. They know what's there, and you can go take a look at it. But here you can see the 4 gates off to the right that was used to manage the water flowing off into the ditch. This one gate here on the left was used to manage the flow of water on down the river. If it was too much or too little, they could adjust this particular one right here, and it ran a gate up and down to manage that water. It was a guy would walk out on as a matter of fact, there we go, 1972, here's what it looked like, different angle. Fellow would walk out here on the planks, and he had a crank he would just put on there, crank it. Crank, 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 crank. Gates would go up and down.
Question, how did they get word to the gate operator to raise or lower the water flow?
Okay, yeah, the question was, how do you get word to the gate operator and everybody else up and down the ditch to manage the water flow? And that was a big challenge. They tried everything from firecrackers to fireworks, hand and arm signals, you name it, they tried everything. They ended up with wire signals. And then to manage the water on down the ditch, they had tenders' cabins. Every few miles there was a cabin, and they had people working there. And just like the toilet bowl float you have in a good old style of toilet bowl, they had those on the water level hooked to a bell. So if it got too low, it would ding. If it got too high, it would ding, and out they went. But you're right, that was a challenge. That was a challenge, getting that word up and down, yeah. So this is the math for our ditch, 12 feet across at the bottom. Drop was 2 feet every mile. Overall, for the whole ditch, all 80 some odd miles, it ended up being almost 5 feet per mile. So a little bit more drop than the ditch. And the reason for that is, and you'll see this in a little bit, you have the ditch, and that's quite a lot of water. That's a pretty decent sized stream. You add 12 feet there, and I don't know, 3.5, 4 feet of water. That's a lot of water flowing down that thing. But at some point, it's going into those pipes and those siphons. That's what I was looking for. The siphons, and the siphons are anywhere from 3.5 to 4 feet around. So you got all that water having to go into a siphon. Now you can't compress water. At least then they couldn't. So the only way you could move water faster through those pipes to keep up with the flow of the big ditch is to drop its elevation so the water's flowing through those pipes a lot faster. So that's why overall the drop of the Davidson ditch is almost 5 feet per mile. But the design of the dugout ditch part was only a couple feet. Build on the south-facing slope. So I went up this spring, and I talked about it before, and I thought I'm going to go up there and actually get a picture of what this looks like. So again, Steve's Highway right here, the river's over here on the far left, and I'm looking west. So that way's north, that way's south. Where are we going to put our ditch? We're going to put it on the south-facing side. Why? Because look what's happening on the north-facing side. You put stuff as much as you can on the north-facing side so you get that early sun day to day, plus in the springtime, this is going to cook off a lot quicker. Penstocks, that's the transition between the ditch and the siphons. Talk about pipe segments in a little bit, the supports. Penstocks, like I said, is a transition from the ditch into the pipe, all wood construction. There are some, I don't know if there's any still around on Davidson Ditch. They're made out of wood, so with all the fires we have over time, a fire just catches it and up it goes. But that's what one looks like from the air on the Davidson Ditch. Some burnt pieces of wood is all that's left. And no, there are a couple that haven't burned up, now that I think about it. But that's what most of them look like right now. Not a lot left. Now this one is over on the China Ester Ditch from their Facebook page. You can see what it looks like. The Siphons did a lot of things for the ditch. First of all, it saved on ditch construction. For each siphon, and I'll show you a picture, it saved a lot of ditch construction. Rather than having to follow the contour up a valley and around, they just put the siphon across. So it saved a lot there. It was the most labor intensive, 16 constructed. There's a Dome Creek siphon. I don't think there's anything left of that one, but that was added in the 40s. And then you could see the average slope was 7 feet per 1,000 feet. So it's from the uphill side to the downhill side was much more of a significant drop than the earthen ditch itself. So I mentioned the cost savings, and this is just a segment out of the Davidson Ditch. Not a very good Google Earth picture, but the line you see here is the Steve's Highway. The white line is the ditch itself, and these three black blocks are places where siphons are today. And if we did not have the siphons there, the ditch, in this case, would have to go up this valley, up, and all the way back down around. Same thing with that one, up a couple valleys, and that one way up there and back down. So by having the siphons, it saved a lot of construction time. The other thing it did, back then, just as it is now, primary transportation was along here. And if something happened to the ditch, or even the siphons, they could get to it pretty quick. But if something happened to the ditch way up here, up in there, I mean, it'd just be difficult to get up there to maintain the things. It also brought maintenance closer to the road. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
They would also lose hundreds of feet of head pressure if they had to go clear around the valley to the other side of where the siphon came up. So they saved an awful lot of altitude loss by making those.
Yeah. Yeah, if they had to run up those valleys, it'd lengthen the ditch, the dugout ditch itself. Yeah, that just helped out with the pressure. Cool, thanks. So bits, pieces, and parts, talk about the pipe. Technology at the time was not that we could have one continuous round tube of metal. So it was rolled metal into two halves, and we know we're going to be putting water through that thing. So what we don't want to have are holes in it. So the big challenge initially is how are we going to seal these two halves together along these edges? And you got a couple options. You overlap them, put rivets in there. And if you've been up the Davidson Ditch, you can see the rivets are about 1.5 inches apart. So there'd be several thousand holes drilled in each one of these pipes just to get the halves together. What they opted to do was go with a way of sealing it. It's called lock bar. So you got the top half in blue, the bottom half in blue, and you got another piece of metal, the yellow. It just slides right down the flattened ends of these things. And then in engineering terms, what they would do, they run a roller on the yellow and squash the heck out of it. And that's what you got. You go up there right now, take a look at it. It's all lock bar. They have a section in Pioneer Park. Take a look at it. you'll see the lock bar along the pipe edges there. So that's done. So now the next thing is, we got to attach them end to end. How are we going to do that? The only thing they can come up with was rivets. So they ended up riveting the ends together. Now, one thing you see right here, the seams are not edge to edge. In the pipe, it's still a weak point with these two seams. So you will see here on the graphic and the actual pipe, they're offset about 30 degrees. So for this pipe over here, you have solid steel here to kind of seal this up. Because once it pulls apart, if it does, it's just like a zipper, away it goes. So you offset the seams. Then again, go up to Davidson Ditch, look at a pipe, and that's what you'll see. Oh, let's go to Davidson Ditch, look at a pipe, and look what we see. So there you go. You can see the lock bar construction, the rivets around the tube, and then the rest of it. This is at the Davidson Ditch little turnout. What's that milepost? 50 something, 52? Yes, sir.
How much water pressure was in the pipe trying to get out?
I do not know the answer to that, but what I can tell you, other than just say a lot, is that the pipe segment, and this is a lower pipe segment going across the bottom of the valley, or draw, whatever you want to call it, the pipe, the steel thickness got thinner up the sides. So they're able to manage that. And there was a decent amount. I'm not aware they actually put pressure gauges on there. And I know there's probably hydrologists, maybe even in this room, can figure out that math. Not high on my list, but a lot. But you mentioned that, and you're going to see a couple other things. You can see a little button at the top right here. You just don't build the pipe, rivet it together, get it up each side of the hill, and then walk away. Because you have to manage that water pressure. Because if it gets backwards on you, okay, I'll get to that in a second. Let me finish here. The other thing you're going to see are on the pipes are the expansion joints. There we go. And it's basically just a slip joint in the pipe that allows for these things right here. Every pipe, from the shortest to the longest, will have at least 3 of these. There's a slip joint at each one of the Penstocks, and there's always at least one in the bottom of the valley. And then I think, and then if you have a long run, like across the Chatanika, you're going to have one of these expansion joints every 1,000 feet. And they have one of these in Pioneer Park next to the steam shovel to take a look at. And as you drive out Chatanika, some of the people that have property where the pipe was, they've taken those sections of pipe, and you can see them sitting next to the road. Lawn ornaments. So it's not high tech, but you've got a smooth steel here that slides inside of a rubber seal. It could be rubber, or they'd use a flax, which is material with wax and stuff like that. It slides in there, and then they have this, in my graphic, a green ring that compresses it. And that just gives the best they could at the time a good water seal around that pipe moving back and forth. I don't have a video. You can go to the Davidson Ditch turnout, and there's a section of pipe there. I'm assuming most of you have seen this. And you can walk up on the pipe, and you get to where the expansion joint is, and just do this, and you'll see it moving, still doing its job. Drains, a lot of different drains. And like I said, you just don't build a pipe and walk away. The pressure in the pipe has got to be managed to a certain point, both just during normal operation and in the fall when it's time to empty the pipe. You can't have it freeze. So right now, this picture, and I think the one on the far left, is from the Davidson Ditch visitor stop there. You can get up on the pipe, take a look at it. But it is interesting, nowadays, just like back then, the main outlets here are right over stream beds because they were concerned with gushing water, washing away stuff, and interrupting the foundation. And you can barely see kind of a wood support right here. But they just weren't putting the drains anywhere and everywhere. They put them in specific places where they know it wouldn't cause additional erosion. because that's a lot of water to empty out in the fall. And if you don't, and it goes back to your question, sir, if you don't manage the pressure, get that nowadays paper straw, cover it and suck on it. Because if it's not managed, even that big steel pipe will collapse on you. There's only one thing to do. Tear it all out and get some new stuff and put it in. You can't fix that. All right, pipe to penstock connections. Again, the penstock, the pipe. Here's what some of them look like. Apollo, thanks for your pictures here. You helped me out with some of this stuff. Really, some of this stuff is in a bad condition for as long as it's been. Yeah, Apollo right there, right? Yeah, he waved. Guy over there in the corner, he helped me out with some of these pictures. Yeah, good stuff. Great pictures. Pipe supports every 20 feet. Just get one big hammer and start hammering those timbers into the ground. Again, not high tech, but it works. This is a picture at the Davidson Ditch turnout again. You can see the locations of the old supports here, 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 and in here. And I was thinking, wait a minute, in the building design it said every 20 feet, and that's about every 10 feet. Well, what I figured is, yeah, they put them in every 20 feet, but when it came time to repair them, because they're made out of wood, they just put new supports in between the old ones. So it actually works out every 20 feet. Here's a little log stack, support stack for DNR to put in a new support here. And they've got another one over here. Here's the expansion joint. Like I said, you can get up on the pipe and walk. You can stand right there. You just do it a little bit. After a while, you think, okay, that's enough. Time to get down. But yeah. And there's the road, U.S. Creek Road up over to Nome Creek. And of the far ridge, you can see there, on the other side is Nome Creek. A couple dredges, smaller dredges work there. There was talk when they were constructing the Davidson Ditch to actually do a traditional siphon from Nome Creek up over that ridge into Davidson Ditch, getting more water. Didn't work out. They opted not to do it. They're getting enough. Footbridges, bits, pieces, and parts. Every, quarter mile had a little footbridge. Here's an aerial picture looking straight down into the ditch, which is going like this. And right here, footbridge is still there. I don't know how much longer. Made out of wood with some metal supports underneath. Okay, siphon lengths. Should be no surprise, the one that crossed the Chatanika was the longest one. The second one from the top, Dome Creek, that one was put in the 40s. And it was put in, it's interesting with the Dome Creek siphon, put it in the 40s, long after Davidson Ditch had been in operation. And what they had to do with Dome Creek, remember I talked about the drop for the ditch itself. It was going around a valley. They put the siphon in there. There wasn't enough drop to get the water flowing in the Dome Creek siphon. So unlike all the other siphons, Dome Creek had auxiliary pumps to help move the water in the Dome Creek siphon. Wastegate stop gates, these are down the ditch, and generally around every penstock or every mile or so, you have some stuff like this. Very simple operation. They're just wooden drop gates used to help control the water flow. And per earlier discussion, these things are real close to the tender's cabins. So the person can run right out there, too high, too low, and just manually pull that thing up and down. They had it in the ditch to control it, and if there's too much water, they had them off to the side also to spill water away if it got to be too much. Here's what one looks like 20 years ago. All made out of wood. I have no idea how much is left. Feeders. I mentioned the proposal to get water from Nome Creek up over the ridge into the Davidson Ditch. A little too expensive. But they do have, Davidson Ditch does have a feeder. In other words, it's water from another stream bringing additional water into the Davidson Ditch. And this is Bell Creek, up Bell Creek. When you're driving the highway, you'll see a sign that says Bell Creek. Look to your left, and you'll see this big valley going up that way. Or if you're up in the air, you look to your left, and right there, can you see it? Right there, on the hill on the right side, you see a light line. That's the Bell Creek feeder ditch that came around and fed into Davidson Ditch. Got a nice year-round stream. Hey, let's get more water in there. The tunnel. There's a tunnel. It's about a mile long. This is up Elliott Highway. I think right there at the very top, I think that's the pie restaurant. Right? Is that too close? I think that is. I think that white spot you see right there is the pie restaurant. So just as you top out, here, there's a little shooting range right here. There's a tunnel underneath of you. And for the Davidson Ditch, rather than go all around the mountain and all this other stuff, boom, right on through the ground, about 1 mile long. I've been to this end of it right here. You can park right here, and you can hike a power line down in there. There is a lot of rubble down below that entrance. That entrance, yeah. So this is the traditional construction for tunnels moving water. Basically, you get through the mountain and you timber it in and just let the water flow. Now, to your question, ready for this? This is the Davidson Ditch Tunnel. So, here you go. You got a tunnel, you're gonna be moving your water. Up to the side, you've got a ledge with a couple small rails. And the purpose for the rails is for this particular dolly. Now, I don't know if it was to move ore or rock or something like that. It could have been during construction. But in this graphic, a maintenance guy will lay down on that trolley, and I hope he started uphill and lay down on his back. Now, the thing that's interesting about this tunnel is, remember I mentioned earlier that the Fairbanks Exploration Company was also building a power generation plant. I'm not an electrician, but they're pushing 400 volts over bare wires out to the camps. So who wants to volunteer to be the guy on that trolley on your back with these wires humming right above you and water next to you? I don't know, but that's the construction of the Davidson Ditch Tunnel. I mentioned Tinder's cabins, all wood. I don't know, you pulled a week shift, 2-week shift. I have no idea how it worked. You got little bells, little floats in the water to keep track of everything. And then over here you can see the gate here, used to manage the water level. Camps, construction camps. No surprise, construction camps went up. The construction was done, the construction camps came down. Not much left of them. This is typical of what one looks like. This is the crossing, the Chatanika Siphon. That's what, mile long, or I don't know how, 8,000 feet long or whatever. And you can see the camp itself is pretty much temporary in nature. They're gonna get in there, they're gonna do the job, and then it's gone. Right now, that whole area is all private property. I haven't been in there. The pipe is gone. The bridge is gone. And you can see where it spans. Again, the blue line right here is the middle ditch. I left it in there. The white line coming from way up there, the Chatanika Siphon, and then on down. And here you can see the hilltop for the NOAA site, and I think just down there is the Poker Flats rocket launch facility. You can see it now, but in the springtime, before everything pops, and then in the fall, if you catch it just right, you know, before it gets all snowy but our birch leaves are down, when you drive the Steese Highway and you get to this point, you look to the left or right, it's really easy to see this track, straight line going up the side of that hill. Again, we did have this one bridge with carrying the pipe. There was nothing new to the technology. It was established technology, but stuff happens. The only thing you do is dig it out and put a new one up. Ditch breaks, it's called cribbing. You get in there with a bunch of, the ditch breaks out, the wall breaks out, and all the water's gushing down. You let it gush down, you empty it out, get in there with cribbing, and you put everything back together. By the way, not the best pictures, but hopefully you get the idea. This is not our current Chatanika highway, but the same thing would apply. A lot of water up there, something breaks, it's just bringing mud, dirt, and everything else down on top of you. And everybody's got their shovel. Everybody out of the car. Okay, this is an annual cycle. It's about 18 months or so. But it kind of gives you an idea of the work that was going on once everything was in operation. Now, the goal of the Davidson Ditch was that once it was done, it would not need any additional power source to operate. Gravity is all, and that's true. And it worked that way until we get to the Dome Creek pipe that was installed later that needed a pump. But everything ran off gravity, but you did need people out there to maintain it, work it, and fix it when it broke. Zoom out on Google Earth. The white line is Davidson Ditch. The blue line about halfway down is the Bell Creek feeder that I mentioned. The yellow line kind of in the middle is the middle ditch. And the other ones you can see. To include over here, our China pump house that went around, pumped it up to the ditch there. A lot of ditches. And the kind of sort of the common denominator is that as much as possible, again, they're built on the south-facing slopes. Gold production in Alaska. You can see we have a pretty good uptick here in the Fairbanks district once we get the dredges going. My references. Oh, some questions I had. Previous presentations, inverted siphons used earlier. Yes, California was a big mining. Utah, Arizona, where they needed to move water, they did use the inverted siphons, which are what we have. You can see the names of some of the other ditches in the Fairbanks area. Pull a lot of information from Chronicling America. Everybody using that? It's free. Got to make a pitch for it. Government program, Library of Congress, a couple other federal agencies got together. They send out computers, training, and information to libraries across the United States. If you have any old newspapers, scan them and send them to us. You can go to Chronicling America right now from your house and do searches for free of all kinds of newspapers across the United States going back as early as whatever. So when you have nothing else better to do between midnight and 4 a.m., log on to Chronicling America. You don't log on, you just go there. Okay, there's no log on or anything like that. It's really a great resource. And you can use search terms by state, word, date range, all that other stuff.
Are there other questions that people have here?
How do they get the siphons going? You know, like after things are going to start up for another season? I mean,
well, good question. Siphons are always downstream from the, and these are, as opposed to standard siphons, some of us might remember siphoning gas out of a car. The standard siphon is up over something. We have technically inverted siphons. They're going down. So, and they're downstream, so your upstream water just starts filling it. And you got people managing it, watching it, fills up, and finally gets to a level. If the water input is here, the output is here, it fills up to a point and it starts filling down the ditch. But we don't have any traditional siphons in the Davidson Ditch. They are all inverted siphons. They don't go over the top of anything.
Was there a certain, I don't know, just average, or I don't know, maybe not average, but certain drop you had to get in that siphon from where it entered the pipe to the other side where it left the pipe? Did they have to figure that out pretty precisely, or could you just eyeball it, or what, do you know?
Well, two things on the siphons. They had markers. When the water level gets to this point, that's where we want it. If it gets too much, hopefully it's flowing on down to fill up the rest of the ditch like early in the spring. But if it gets too much, you have the diversion dams that you can just dump it over the side. They manage it that way. The other thing with the siphons, remember in that one picture I showed you, one that collapsed like a straw, is that the up end of the siphon had a vent line there. And what would cause that siphon to collapse like a straw is water flowing down, flowing down, flowing down. We all know there's branches, twigs, sticks, bugs, and everything. Is if it clogs up in the uphill side, that water that's in there is still going to continue to flow. That's what creates the vacuum, and that's what squeezes it. What they did do is if you can get up to one of the uphill siphon ends, they put a vent up there, kind of an emergency vent. And you'll see that on a lot of them, just a pipe that sticks up like 10 feet. That's only about that big around. And that just allows, if it gets clogged up, and they had screens and stuff like that up there to stop the big stuff, but if it does get clogged up, that allows air to go shooting in there to keep the pipe from collapsing. So there was a little bit of science to it. But for the operators, it was just that float switch and marks on the ground.
I was told, and I never followed up with research myself, that a group came in and built a hydro dam at the end of the ditch. And it was all going well. They had power coming out of it. Then 64 flood came along, caused a lot of damage on the ditch itself, and no more water.
Yeah, and what you were told is correct, is for that upper end of the Davidson Ditch, I'll say from the dam down through probably mile 35 or 40 or so, so about the upper 35 to 40 miles, when Fairbanks Exploration Company closed up, they sold off scrap, they sold off everything, they sold off the ditch. You're correct, a utilities company bought that upper 35 to 40 miles. And pretty close to where I showed you the bridge across the Chatanika, they did have a hydraulic power plant, which ran until, what'd you say, 64, 67 flood. Took it all out, not financially viable to rebuild the thing. Yep, absolutely. So there's enough water pressure there to make electricity for everybody living up and down the Chatanika. Yeah. I don't know the total numbers, but it is interesting that I think starting in 1926 or 27, for about a 3-year period, 80% of the employees in Fairbanks worked for Fairbanks Exploration Company. You were part of it was a corporate town. That was a company town then, yeah, the 3 or 4 year period. It was, yeah. But once it got going, you just needed the people to maintain it. Obviously, you got management. And on the dredges, you make the most out of a dredge if you can run it 24/7. And so on any dredge, the average number of employees was only 8 to 12 people on any dredge when it was cranking. The one thing that the Fairbanks Exploration Company had done is figured out how to maintain dredges, because downtime was a killer. And you can imagine big machines like that, when they break big. But they had figured out a maintenance schedule to keep their dredges among the highest operational rate of all dredges in the United States. That really helped them out. Yeah. Is there? Who's close? Go ahead.
Was any of the water from the Davidson Ditch used to float the dredges as well as using it in water cannons?
Initially I thought that maybe it obviously wouldn't hurt, but going out to look at the dredges, very soon, with the dredges, the way they operate, they just kind of make their own little pond or their lake and they float around doing their stuff, is probably not. It was probably not needed. If it overfilled a little bit, just flow on out. Yeah, probably not.
Wes, can you address the fact that these highway existed because the ditch needed to be built?
My understanding is yes. First of all, the answer is yes, but it was kind of a partnership. Of course, the company's going to the territorial government saying, hey, we need help. And they're kind of getting the wave off. So Fairbanks Exploration Company is working their road. And then the Territorial Road Commission's going, yeah, keep doing that. Keep doing that. Keep doing that. Just keep going, and we'll help you out. I think they helped out a little bit, but that was kind of the way things were. And yeah.
Well, I don't know what the statute of limitations is for crime, but I wish that I had taken pictures in 60, 61, 62, 60, 64, 65, when we used to canoe, that it was the most gentle, beautiful float you could ever have. And it was just heavenly. I mean, it was things to take pictures of when there was water in the ditch.
Yeah.
And I know that other people used it. They said that they did well hunting, from canoes on that ditch, using it. I don't know how legal it was, but I do know it was an awful lot of fun.
Well, it is something. Even nowadays, you saw my picture looking down on the middle ditch. I go up and get the aerial pictures of Davidson Ditch on segments of it, and especially in the springtime, full of water, full of water. There's a lot of trees and brush growing through it and everything, but we had that discussion, is it still flowing right now? Well, I'm sure in those little segments, if they have a little downslope to them, water's dumping out and falling back into the Chatanika somewhere. But yeah, they're holding water just fine. And of course, the current highway has cut across back and forth 3 or 4 times across the ditch itself, just the way construction is. But yeah, still hold water, and fly along it and looking along, and I can see this ribbon of sunlight reflecting through the woods. You can see it going down. Oh, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yes, sir.
Yeah. First of all, this was an amazing presentation. I mean, the engineering design that you showed was amazing. So thank you for the presentation. The question I had was, where exactly did the ditch end?
Right now, where it ended is in Fox. When you're on the highway and you're going into Fox, to the left is the dredge, to the right is the dredge, to the left is also Goldstream Road. So as you're on that road, you pass them and you look up, the Steese is going to kind of go around to the right a little bit. But if you look up, there's a hillside right there. That's where it ended right there. Now originally, so that's 80 some odd miles. Now originally the design called for the ditch to go all the way to Esther. But they figured, hey, it's easier to run a pump house, pump it up over the hill from the river, and then just that small ditch in there. But original design was to run all the way to Esther. Yeah.
How much money in gold did they get from the operation of the ditch?
I have that information, but it was more than enough to take care of the investors, and it was more than enough to make a real good profit. I think I had it in there. Maybe I didn't show it that long, but the construction was up to 5 years, and they had figured there's at least 19 more years of gold underneath the ground, and it all worked out. It all worked out, yeah. How about just a lot? A lot. They got a lot.
I think we've used up all of our questions for you here, and remind everybody there was so much material here. If you want to go to the Summer Sessions website, you'll be able to view this again, as well as the last 3 or 4 years of this series. But let's give him another big round of applause. What a phenomenal presentation.